The college acceptance letter trembled in my hands as my father's words crashed like a wrecking ball through my carefully built dreams. Your brother has a future. You'll marry. Just like that, my college fund, the freedom I'd earned through countless nights of studying and weekend shifts, was handed to my brother for his third chance at rehab. The quiet theft of my future happened over dinner, between passing the salt and refilling water glasses, my mother's averted eyes speaking volumes in their silence. They thought my compliance meant surrender, my quiet meant acceptance. But what my father failed to understand when he took my money was that he'd also taken the last of my loyalty. And when my economics teacher saw the emptiness behind my eyes the next day and asked what was wrong, she couldn't have known that her simple act of listening would become the first domino in a rebellion 18 years in the making. I sit at the window of Gray Hill University's main library, watching autumn leaves spiral down onto the quad. Students rush between classes, laughing, arguing, living. The paper in my hand still feels unreal, full scholarship renewal confirmed. My fingers trace the embossed university seal, and I can't help but think, this almost didn't happen. My future was stolen before I even got to fight for it. 1 year ago, my life was different. 1 year ago, I was Lena Voss, the quiet, responsible daughter who did everything right. Our house in Millfield was a cramped two-story with peeling white paint and creaky floorboards that tattled on midnight wanderings. Dad, Conrad Voss, inherited his father's hardware store downtown, the kind of place being slowly strangled by big-box retailers. He compensated for his business failures with absolute control at home. Dinner at 6 sharp, he'd announce, not a request but a command. Lena, help your mother. Shane, homework done. Shane, my younger brother by 2 years, would mumble something non-committal while scrolling through his phone. Golden boy. Troubled soul. Endless excuses. He's just finding himself, Mom would say, placing steaming dishes on the table with precision. Marlena Voss, once an aspiring artist, now a woman who measured her days in loads of laundry and perfectly aligned dinner plates. That particular evening, I'd been floating. Earlier that day, Ms. Alston, my guidance counselor, had confirmed what felt impossible. I'd been accepted to the University of Gray Hill with a partial scholarship. One financial form away from freedom, she'd said, her eyes crinkling with genuine pride. You've done the impossible, Lena. First-generation college student, top of your class despite everything. Everything. She never specified what everything meant, but we both knew. The nights I stayed up helping Shane with assignments he neglected anyway, the weekends working at Davis Pharmacy instead of joining debate team competitions, the careful saving of every dollar from my birthday cards since I was 12. I'd created my own college fund. $3,000. Not nearly enough, but with my scholarship and the $5,000 my parents had saved for me since birth, I could make it work. Community college wasn't my fate after all. At dinner, I pushed peas around my plate, waiting for the right moment. Mom had made pot roast, Dad's favorite. His mood seemed stable. Shane was actually present rather than out with friends. I have news, I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. Dad looked up, fork paused midway to his mouth. What is it? I got accepted to Gray Hill. With a scholarship. The words tumbled out in a rush. I can start this fall if we submit the financial aid forms this week. Mom's face brightened briefly before glancing at Dad. Shane snorted. Gray Hill. Dad set down his fork deliberately. That liberal arts place 3 hours away? It's one of the best schools in the state, I said. Their economics program is nationally ranked. Economics. He said it like a punchline. And how much is this costing? I laid out my careful math, the scholarship covering 60%, my savings, the college fund they'd started for me. It was tight, but possible. Dad chewed slowly, methodically. When he finally spoke, his voice was matter-of-fact. That money's gone, Lena. The room tilted. What? Your college fund. We used it. He took another bite, as if discussing nothing more consequential than the weather. Used it for what? My voice had gone high, unfamiliar. Dad glanced at Shane, who suddenly found his plate fascinating. Your brother needs help. Professional help. And a fresh start at Westridge Prep next semester. The hardware store isn't doing well, you know that. We had to make choices. My chest constricted. You took my college money for Shane's prep school? And rehab, Mom added softly, not meeting my eyes. It was necessary, honey. Shane had been caught with pills again. Third time. Each incident swept under the rug, each consequence magically disappearing. But my future? Apparently dispensable. I've been working for years, I whispered. Saving. Planning. And that's commendable. Dad nodded as if bestowing a great compliment. Very responsible. But your brother has a future. You'll marry. This is just common sense. Common sense. As if my dreams were a frivolous luxury, while Shane's 10th chance was an investment. You can take night classes at Millfield Community if you really want to, Dad continued, reaching for his water glass. Live at home. Save money. It's practical. Practical. The word landed like a slap. I looked at Mom, searching for any sign of protest, but she simply adjusted her napkin and murmured something about getting dessert. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I confronted Dad in his study. He sat in his leather chair, reading glasses perched on his nose, bills spread across the desk. You had no right, I said, voice trembling. That was my money, too. He looked up, irritation flashing across his face. I'm still the parent here, Lena. I make the financial decisions in this family. But my future. His palm slammed against the desk, making me flinch. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. I've kept this family afloat while the store bleeds money. Your brother needs help, real help, or he'll end up dead or in jail. Is that what you want? Of course not, but there are no buts here. This discussion is over. I stood frozen, tears burning behind my eyes but refusing to fall. When I turned to leave, Mom was in the doorway, silent witness to my humiliation. Mom, please, I whispered. She touched my arm gently. Don't cause more tension, Lena. It's been decided. Decided. As if my life were a minor agenda item checked off a list. In my room, I pulled out the Gray Hill acceptance letter, creamy paper with navy letterhead, my ticket out. With shaking hands, I held it over my trash can and struck a match. The flame licked the corner, then consumed my future in bright orange vengeance. I watched it burn completely before letting the ashes fall. The following days blurred together. I moved through the house like a ghost, speaking only when necessary. I went to school, to work, back home. Mechanical. Empty. Then came exam day. AP Economics, my strongest subject. The test that would determine if I qualified for college credit. Credit I no longer needed. I stared at the exam paper, the questions swimming before my eyes. Supply and demand curves. Marginal utility. Concepts I'd mastered now rendered meaningless. My hand shook as I gripped my pencil. The room felt airless. 40 minutes into the exam, I'd written exactly 3 words. My future, once so carefully plotted on a graph of possibilities, had flatlined. Time's up, Mr. Reynolds announced. Please pass your papers forward. I handed in a nearly blank test and stumbled into the hallway. Ms. Alston was waiting, her expression concerned. Lena, can I see you in my office? I followed her numbly, collapsing into the chair across from her desk. The walls of her office were covered with college pennants, colorful reminders of escape routes now closed to me. You're not here today, she said gently. What's happening? The kindness in her voice cracked something inside me. Words spilled out in a near whisper, my college fund, Shane's rehab, Dad's dismissal of my future, Mom's silence. Through it all, Ms. Alston listened, her expression unchanging except for a slight tightening around her eyes. When I finished, she stood abruptly. Wait here, she said and walked out. I sat alone, exhausted from speaking my truth aloud. 5 minutes passed. 10. Just as I considered leaving, the door opened. Ms. Alston wasn't alone. Behind her stood Mr. Harlon, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, a board member I'd seen at school events, but never spoken to. Former university dean, rumored to have connections everywhere that mattered. Lena, Ms. Alston said. I'd like you to tell Mr. Harlon exactly what you just told me. Mr. Harlon didn't interrupt once as I repeated my story, his weathered face impossible to read. He sat with his hands folded, occasionally nodding but offering no reaction that might sway my telling. When I finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably. Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Voss, he finally said, his voice deeper than I expected. This situation is unfortunately not unique, though that doesn't make it any less unjust. He exchanged a look with Ms. Alston that I couldn't interpret. We'll need some time, Ms. Alston said. But Lena, I want you to know something, your education matters. Not just to you. To us. I left school feeling oddly weightless. Something had shifted, though I couldn't name it. For the first time in days, I felt seen. At home, I slipped back into the routine of silence. I made dinner alongside Mom, nodded when Dad talked about the store's struggles, and retreated to my room to research community colleges. I started a journal, hiding it between my mattress and box spring, small truths I couldn't speak aloud. Today, Dad said the family made sacrifices for Shane. My future wasn't a sacrifice. It was a casualty. Mom asked if I'd applied to Millfield Community yet. As if my dreams were transferable, replaceable. I wonder if Shane knows what was traded for his fresh start. If he'd care. 3 days after my conversation with Mr. Harlon, Ms. Alston called me into her office during lunch. I've been making calls, she said without preamble, sliding a folder across her desk. These are alternate scholarship opportunities. Some are obscure but legitimate. Application deadlines are highlighted. I flipped through the pages. Names I'd never heard of. The Whitman Legacy Grant, the Eleanor Caldwell Women in Economics Fund, the Eastern Regional Alumni Association Emergency Scholarship. These are long shots, I said. Yes. But there's also this. She tapped a separate document. The Alumni Lifeline Fund. It's not publicized. It was created specifically for students whose family support has been compromised. Why are you doing this? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Ms. Alston removed her glasses, suddenly looking older, wearier. Because 25 years ago, I was you. Different circumstances, same result. No one fought for me, and I've spent my career making sure that doesn't happen again. I took the folder home and hid it with my journal. Each night, I'd complete one application after everyone had gone to bed. With each essay I wrote, each form I filled out, guilt gnawed at me. Was I betraying my family? Was education worth this divide? Dad seemed to think I'd gotten over it, patting my shoulder at breakfast, commenting that I was being sensible now. 2 weeks into my secret campaign, Shane came home for dinner, a rare appearance. He'd been staying with friends more than at home, coming by only to get clean clothes or ask for money. He sauntered in wearing a new leather jacket, reeking of cigarettes. The prodigal returns, Dad announced, beaming as if Shane had accomplished something extraordinary by simply showing up. Dinner was the usual performance, Dad asking Shane gentle questions about his progress, Mom piling extra food on his plate, Shane offering vague assurances about getting his act together. I pushed my food around, silent. So, sis, Shane said, mouth full of mashed potatoes. Heard you had a meltdown about community college. Playing the poor girl pity games? Dad chuckled. She's past that now. Aren't you, Lena? I looked at my brother, thinner, eyes slightly unfocused, the new jacket probably purchased with what should have been my tuition money. For the first time, I saw him clearly, not malicious, just entitled. Taught by our parents that his needs superseded all others. I'm figuring things out, I said carefully. That's my practical girl, Dad said. The next morning, Ms. Alston handed me an envelope. My recommendation for the Montier Foundation. I've sent the original already. I read it in the bathroom between classes, tears blurring the words. Demonstrates exceptional resilience in the face of systematic dismissal of her potential. Academically gifted, but more importantly, possesses the quiet determination that transforms obstacles into stepping stones. That afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. Is this Lena Voss? This is Zara Amati. Ms. Alston gave me your number. The name was vaguely familiar, a former student, graduated 3 years ago. She'd gone to Columbia on a full ride. I was in your position once, Zara said without preamble. Different details, same story. Parents who decided my future wasn't worth investing in. What did you do? I asked, ducking into an empty classroom to take the call. I got out. With help. Now I help others. Her voice was matter-of-fact. Your life's not their property, Lena. Take it back. We talked for an hour. She explained how the Montier Foundation worked, coached me through what they'd be looking for, helped me refine my personal statement. For the first time, I felt like I had allies, people who understood what was at stake. That evening, as I took out the trash, Dad called me into his study. On his desk was a receipt I'd accidentally left in the kitchen, confirmation of a scholarship application submission. What's this? He asked, eyes narrowed. A scholarship application. No point lying. After everything we discussed? After all the adjustments we've made as a family? You made the adjustments, Dad. I never agreed. His face darkened. This is how you repay us? With sneaking around? With ingratitude? Maybe it's time I cut off everything. Your phone, your car privileges. Since you're so determined to go your own way. Something snapped inside me. You already did, I said, my voice steady. You cut off my future without even asking me. What else is there to take? He rose from his chair, face flushed, but Mom appeared in the doorway. Conrad, please, she said. It's just an application. It doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. It meant everything. 2 nights later, at 11:42 p.m., an email arrived that would change everything. Dear Ms. Voss, the Montier Women's Grant Committee is pleased to inform you that you have been selected as this year's emergency recipient. This grant covers full tuition, housing, and meal plan at the University of Gray Hill for your freshman year, with renewal options based on academic performance. Due to the unique circumstances of your application, we are offering immediate placement. The fall semester begins in 2 weeks. Your housing assignment and orientation details are attached. Please confirm your acceptance within 48 hours. Sincerely, Eleanor Montier, Chairwoman. I stared at my screen, hand pressed against my mouth to stifle any sound that might alert my parents. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to leave everything behind. I replied immediately. I accept with deepest gratitude. Then I called Zara. I got it, I whispered. But I have to leave in 2 weeks. Perfect, she said. I have a spare room. You can stay with me until your dorm is ready. Start packing, only essentials. I'll be in touch tomorrow with details. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, heart pounding, planning my escape from the life that had suddenly become too small to contain me. I started gathering my essentials the next day. Passport, birth certificate, social security card, documents I'd need for my new life. I slipped them into a manila envelope and taped it beneath my desk drawer. Clothes went into garbage bags, hidden in the back of my closet to be transferred to my suitcase the day of departure. Ms. Alston helped me create a budget, connecting me with the financial aid office at Gray Hill to ensure my scholarship paperwork was properly filed. Zara sent me her address and a photo of the small bedroom where I'd be staying until my dorm was ready. It's not much, she texted, but it's quiet and it's yours. The word yours made me pause. Nothing in my life had ever been truly mine, not my time, not my future, not even my disappointments. Everything was filtered through the lens of family obligation. I was halfway through packing my books when Mom walked in without knocking. I froze, a copy of The Wealth of Nations suspended between my hands and a half-filled box. She stared at the scene, clothes folded neatly on my bed, boxes stacked by the wall. Her face drained of color. What is this? She whispered, though the answer was obvious. I set the book down carefully. I got a scholarship. Full ride to Gray Hill. I leave next week. Next week. She stepped into the room, looking at my belongings as if seeing them for the first time. You can't just leave. I can. And I am. Mom sank onto my bed, disturbing the neat piles of clothes. You'll destroy this family if you leave. Your father, he's under so much pressure. The store, Shane's treatment. I'm not the one who destroyed anything, I said quietly. Dad took my future and gave it to Shane. Again. That was his choice. This is mine. She looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I expected anger, accusations. Instead, her eyes filled with a distant sadness. Without another word, she stood and walked out. No hug, no support, just the soft click of my door closing. That night at dinner, the silence was deafening. Shane was absent as usual. Dad talked about a supplier issue at the store. Mom passed dishes robotically. I ate small bites, tasting nothing. Good news about Shane, Dad announced as he refilled his water glass. His counselor says he's making real progress. The prep school is holding a spot for spring semester. He raised his glass. To the son who makes us proud. Mom smiled weakly and lifted her glass. I stared at the table, my water untouched. After dinner, I retreated to my room and wrote a letter, not angry, not bitter, just honest. Dear Mom, Dad, and Shane, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've received a full scholarship to the University of Gray Hill. Classes start next week. I'm not leaving to hurt you. I'm leaving because staying would hurt me more. When you took my college fund without asking, without even telling me until it was gone, you made it clear where I stand in this family. Second place. Always. I am more than what you've allowed me to be. I need to discover who that person is. I don't hate you, but I can't keep shrinking to make everyone else comfortable. Not anymore. I'll call when I'm settled. Lena. I sealed the envelope and placed it on my desk where they'd find it after I was gone. The morning of my departure arrived with a pale September sun. I'd barely slept, listening for any movement in the house. At 5 a.m., I texted Zara, ready. 20 minutes later, her reply came, outside. I carried my suitcase and 2 boxes down the stairs, careful to avoid the creaky third step. The house breathed around me, familiar walls, familiar shadows. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I making a mistake? Was freedom worth this price? Then I remembered Dad's words. Your brother has a future. You'll marry. As if my worth could be measured only in relation to others. As if my dreams were disposable. I placed my letter prominently on the kitchen table, took one last look around, and walked out the front door. Zara's beat-up Honda idled at the curb, headlights dim in the early morning fog. Ms. Alston sat in the passenger seat, face solemn but eyes bright. You made it, she said as I approached. Barely, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. We loaded my meager belongings into the trunk. I climbed into the back seat, heart hammering against my ribs. As Zara pulled away from the curb, I turned for one last look at the house. No lights had come on. No one had followed. It gets easier, Zara said, catching my eye in the rear-view mirror. Not right away, but it does. The drive to Zara's apartment took 40 minutes. We rode in silence, the radio playing softly, some indie song about breaking chains and finding light. Appropriate. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building near the university. 1 bedroom plus a converted sunroom where I'd be staying. The space was small but filled with plants, books, colorful throw pillows. It smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Home sweet home, Zara said, dropping my suitcase by a futon covered in a bright blue bedspread. Until your dorm's ready. It's perfect, I said and meant it. The room had large windows overlooking a small park. Sunlight streamed across the hardwood floor. Most importantly, it wasn't my parent house. Ms. Alston helped me unpack while Zara made breakfast. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself breathing normally. Deep, full breaths instead of the shallow, anxious gasps that had become my norm. I should get to the school, Ms. Alston said, checking her watch. Orientation starts Monday. You have your schedule? I nodded, pulling out the printed email from Gray Hill. Good. She hesitated, then pulled me into a tight hug. I'm proud of you, Lena. This took courage. After she left, Zara and I sat at her small kitchen table, eating scrambled eggs and toast. First day is the hardest, she said, pouring more orange juice into my glass. By day 3, you'll feel like you've been here forever. Did your parents ever forgive you? I asked. She considered this, head tilted. My father hasn't spoken to me in 4 years. My mother calls on my birthday. They made their choice. I made mine. She shrugged. Some relationships can't bend without breaking. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Where are you? I turned off my phone without replying. Monday arrived with surprising speed. Zara loaned me a professional-looking blazer for my first day and drove me to campus. Gray Hill University sprawled across manicured lawns and tree-lined paths, historic buildings interspersed with modern glass structures. Students streamed toward the central quad, laughing, calling to each other, completely unaware that my entire life had just transformed. My first class was Introduction to Macroeconomics in Thompson Hall. I found a seat near the back, heart racing, palms sweaty. The professor, Dr. Whitman, was a tall woman with short gray hair and intense eyes. She spoke passionately about economic systems, market failures, invisible hands. I took furious notes, afraid to miss a single word. It felt surreal, sitting in a real university classroom, treated as an adult with ideas worth hearing. No one knew my story. No one saw me as Lena Voss, the responsible daughter who took care of everyone else. Here, I was just another freshman with a future stretching before me. As I walked across campus to my next class, my phone buzzed with notifications. I turned it back on, bracing for angry messages from Dad. Instead, I found something worse. A post from Millfield's local gossip forum had been texted to me by 3 different high school classmates. Local teen abandons family after brother's health crisis. The anonymous post detailed how I'd selfishly run away to college, while my troubled brother fought for his recovery. It described my parents as heartbroken and betrayed. Every detail was twisted just enough to paint me as the villain. I knew immediately who had written it. Dad's phrasing was unmistakable. Turn her back on family obligations was his favorite criticism for anyone who prioritized themselves. My hands shook as I read the comments. Some people defended me, but others piled on, calling me selfish, ungrateful, cold. The post had been shared dozens of times. Small-town drama at its finest. For a moment, shame washed over me, the familiar feeling that I'd done something wrong by choosing myself. Then anger replaced it, hot and clarifying. They'd taken my money, my dreams, and now they were trying to take my reputation. I opened my email and began typing a message to Ms. Alston. You once said I was one financial form away from freedom. You were wrong. Freedom cost me much more, my family, my home, my past. But what you gave me was worth even that price. You didn't just save my education. You saved me. Thank you for believing I was worth fighting for. I hit send, then blocked the gossip forum on my phone. I had economics homework to do, a future to build, a life to claim as my own. The past could wait. As I walked toward the library, autumn leaves crunched beneath my feet, red and gold, and full of possibility. For the first time in years, I moved forward without looking back. My dorm room at Wilson Hall was exactly what you'd expect. Cinder block walls painted an institutional off-white, twin beds with thin mattresses, metal desks that had endured decades of student abuse. After 2 weeks at Zara's apartment, it felt strangely official. This was real. I was really here. Need help with that? A voice came from the doorway as I struggled to make my bed with the extra-long sheets the university had recommended. My roommate, Ayanna Williams, leaned against the doorframe. Tall, with close-cropped dark hair and an easy confidence I immediately envied, she'd arrived yesterday with her parents and a car full of carefully labeled boxes. I've never seen anyone make a bed with such intensity, she said, grabbing the other end of the fitted sheet. It's like you're performing surgery. I laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. First time living away from home.
Same.
But my mom made me practice packing and unpacking 3 times before we drove here. Law school prep, apparently. Ayanna rolled her eyes. She's convinced organization is the first step to becoming Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We worked in companionable silence, tucking corners and arranging pillows. It felt strange having someone help me without expecting anything in return. So, economics major? Ayana asked, nodding toward my textbooks. That's the plan. You're pre-law? Since I was 10 and successfully argued my way into staying up an hour past bedtime using legal precedent from my older brother. Our third roommate arrived that afternoon. Chloe Bennett, a nursing student from Connecticut with honey blonde hair and a perpetual expression of gentle concern. She came bearing homemade cookies and family photos already framed for her desk. My mom said first day friends become family, she announced, arranging the cookies on a plate. So we might as well start with sugar. That night, the three of us sat cross-legged on the dorm room floor, sharing stories between bites of cookie. Ayana described her family's 4th of July traditions, complete with her father's notorious grill explosions. Chloe talked about her younger sisters and their shared bedroom with its strict division of territory. When my turn came, I hesitated. My family is complicated, I said finally. Whose isn't? Ayana laughed. Mine's pretty normal, Chloe said. Which makes me the weird one here, I guess. I smiled but didn't elaborate. How could I explain that 3 weeks ago, I'd walked away from everything I'd known? That I'd left a letter on a kitchen table and disappeared before dawn? That my phone contained dozens of unanswered texts from my mother and none from my father? Later, as we prepared for bed, Chloe touched my shoulder to ask about the bathroom schedule. I flinched involuntarily, a quick, sharp movement. Chloe's eyes widened slightly, her nursing student instincts clearly registering the reaction. Sorry, she said softly. I should have asked before touching. It's fine, I said quickly. Just jumpy. New place and all. But it wasn't fine, and somehow Chloe knew it. She kept a careful distance after that, always announcing her presence, never approaching from behind. Small courtesies I hadn't realized I needed. In my second week, I discovered the university offered free counseling services. 6 sessions with a graduate psychology student, no questions asked. I signed up without thinking too much about it, curious more than anything. My counselor was a woman named Diane with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Her office had plants in every corner and a box of tissues placed tactfully within reach. What brings you here, Lena? She asked once I'd settled into the overstuffed chair across from her. Just adjusting to college, I said lamely. That's certainly an adjustment. Anything specific you're finding challenging? I stared at my hands. I left home under difficult circumstances. Diane waited, her silence inviting but not demanding. My father took my college fund to pay for my brother's rehab. When I found another way to come here, my family didn't support the decision. That sounds incredibly painful, Diane said. How have you been coping? The simplicity of the question undid me. No one had asked how I was coping. They'd asked what happened, what I planned to do, what classes I was taking, but not how I was managing the emotional earthquake that had swallowed my former life. I'm not sure, I admitted. Some days I feel free. Other days I feel like I've done something terrible. Why terrible? Because good daughters don't leave. They don't put themselves first. Diane's expression remained neutral, but her eyes were kind. According to whom? My father. My mother. Everyone in my hometown, apparently. In that first session, I said little else. I left feeling oddly hollow, as if I'd opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through. By our third session, something had shifted. As I described the night my father announced he'd taken my college fund, tears came. Not the controlled, quiet tears I'd permitted myself in private, but ugly, gasping sobs that seemed to rise from somewhere ancient within me. He made me feel small, I choked out. So small that I wouldn't ask for more. So small that I'd be grateful for whatever scraps of approval he offered. Diane handed me tissues. And your mother? The question landed like a stone. She watched. She always just watched. As I spoke about my mother, memories surfaced, fragments I'd buried. Marlena crying behind the locked bathroom door. The careful way she arranged herself at the dinner table, taking up minimal space. How she flinched when my father raised his voice, a reaction so familiar I'd stopped noticing. She was trapped too, I realized aloud. But she let him do the same thing to me. Sometimes people who are drowning can't save others, Diane said quietly. But she was my mother, I whispered. She was supposed to protect me. Yes, Diane agreed. She was. Those simple words, an acknowledgement of what should have been, broke something loose inside me. I couldn't excuse my mother's silence anymore, couldn't pretend it hadn't wounded me as deeply as my father's actions. October brought midterms and the first chill of autumn. I threw myself into studying, grateful for the legitimate excuse to focus on something other than my fractured family ties. Ayana and I formed a study group with 2 other economics majors, spending late nights in the library fueled by vending machine coffee and shared anxiety. On a Tuesday evening, my phone lit up with a name I'd been avoiding, Jason Miller, my former lab partner and one of the few people from Millfield I still occasionally texted. Did you hear about Shane? My stomach clenched.
No.
What happened? Arrested at Taylor Burke's party. Assault. Pretty bad. I stared at the screen, waiting for the familiar rush of responsibility, the need to fix, to help, to make things right. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, detached sadness. Is the other person okay? I finally typed.
Yeah.
Brad Wilson. Broken nose. Shane was wasted. Of course he was. The rehab my future had purchased hadn't lasted long. Thanks for telling me, I wrote. Your dad's going nuts. Telling everyone Shane was provoked. You okay? The question caught me off guard. No one from home had asked if I was okay. They'd asked when I was coming back, why I'd left, how I could do this to my family, but not how I was doing.
I'm ok, he replied.
Different world here. Glad you got out, Jason wrote. Always knew you would. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Shane, his easy smile, the way he could charm anyone when he wanted to, how he'd taught me to ride a bike when we were kids. Before the drinking, before the pills, before he became the sun our family orbited around while I became the reliable moon, defined only by reflected light. My father would be defending him still, finding excuses, arranging second and third and fourth chances. My mother would be making Shane's favorite meals, speaking in soothing tones, pretending everything would be fine if we just didn't talk about the problems. And I was here, in a narrow dorm bed, surrounded by textbooks and new friends and possibilities that had nothing to do with cleaning up someone else's mess. The realization was both terrible and freeing. I couldn't save them. I couldn't fix them. And for the first time, I understood that I didn't want to. The following week, I received an email from Professor Layton, who taught a popular campus podcast course. Dear Lena, your economic inequity paper was exceptional. We're doing a special series on scholarship disparities for the department podcast. Would you be willing to share your perspective? The episode is titled Hidden Costs, When Education Isn't for Everyone. Best regards, Dr. Anita Layton. My first instinct was to decline. I'd been careful about what I shared at Grayhill, presenting a sanitized version of my background. But something about Dr. Layton's invitation resonated. Maybe my story could help someone else feeling trapped by family expectations or financial control. The recording took place in a small studio in the communications building. The student host, Marcus, had a script of questions, but the conversation quickly moved beyond them. So many families see education differently for sons and daughters. I found myself saying, it's subtle sometimes. The way achievements are celebrated differently, the way futures are imagined. Was that your experience? Marcus asked. I took a deep breath. My future was stolen before I even got to fight for it. My college fund was taken for my brother's rehab and prep school because, in my father's words, your brother has a future. You'll marry. The words hung in the air, raw and undeniable. How did you get here then? Marcus asked. I thought of Ms. Alston, Mr. Harlon, Zara, the unlikely allies who'd appeared when I needed them most. Someone listened, I said simply. Someone believed I deserved the future I'd worked for. The podcast, titled My Future Was Stolen, was released the following Monday. By Wednesday, it had been downloaded over 5,000 times. The university newsletter picked up the story. The Montier Foundation contacted me about featuring my photo on their website with the caption, Resilience is louder than tradition. Suddenly, people recognized me on campus. Strangers emailed their own stories of family financial control. A sophomore approached me in the dining hall to say my podcast had given her courage to confront her parents about their unequal treatment of her and her brother. The attention was uncomfortable but strangely validating. For so long, I'd carried my family's dysfunction as a shameful secret. Speaking it aloud had transformed it from something I needed to hide into something that might actually help others. On a rainy November morning, I checked my email to find a message from my mother, the first direct communication since I'd left. "I miss you. Your father doesn't know I wrote this." 5 words and a secret. A tiny rebellion from a woman who had spent decades compromising. I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to grasp this fragile thread of connection. Another part recoiled, remembering her silence when I needed her voice most. I saved the email, but didn't reply. I wasn't ready. That same week, I interviewed for a research assistant position with Dr. Colwyn, a visiting professor studying economic mobility. The job would provide a small stipend and valuable experience for my resume. "Your application was quite compelling," Dr. Colwyn said as I sat across from her, trying not to fidget. "Particularly your essay on intergenerational economic control as a form of domestic power." My face warmed. I'd written that essay in a late-night burst of clarity after a particularly intense therapy session. "Thank you," I managed. "I'm curious. What are you to economics specifically? Many students with your interests choose sociology or political science." The question made me pause. Why economics? The answer emerged with surprising clarity. "I wanted to understand the systems that give some people power over others," I said. "And I wanted to have the kind of knowledge no one could take away from me." Dr. Colwyn studied me for a moment, then nodded. "The position is yours if you want it. We start next week." As the semester neared its end, Ms. Alston emailed to let me know she was retiring. After 30 years of guiding students toward their futures, she was embracing her own. "You were my last promise to myself," she wrote, "to make sure one more girl made it out. I couldn't be prouder of how you've seized this opportunity." Attached to the email was a photo of Ms. Alston standing beside a moving truck, smiling broadly. She was heading to Oregon to live near her daughter. A new chapter for her, too. I printed the photo and pinned it to my bulletin board, a reminder that freedom could come at any age, that it was never too late to choose yourself. The podcast producers asked if I'd be willing to record a follow-up episode, something more personal. After some consideration, I agreed, but with one condition. I wanted to read the letter I'd left for my family. The day of the recording, my hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. I hadn't looked at it since that pre-dawn morning when I'd placed it on the kitchen table and walked away. "This is the letter I left behind," I said into the microphone. I've never read it aloud before. My voice shook on the first line but steadied as I continued. With each word, I reclaimed a piece of myself, not the obedient daughter I'd been trained to be, but the woman I was becoming.
Strong, certain, free.
When I finished, silence filled the studio. Then Marcus said quietly, "Thank you for sharing that." As I walked back to my dorm through swirling December snow, I realized something had shifted. The weight I'd carried since leaving home, the guilt, the doubt, the fear, had eased. Not disappeared, but lightened enough to let me stand straighter, breathe deeper. I was more than what they'd allowed me to be, and I was just beginning to discover who that person was. By the spring semester of my freshman year, Gray Hill had become home in ways Millfield never had. My research position with Dr. Colwyn evolved into a collaborative project examining financial control as a form of domestic abuse, work that kept me engaged well beyond the required hours. My GPA put me on the dean's list, and I'd been invited to join the Economics Honor Society despite being only a freshman. Most surprisingly, I'd found myself becoming someone people looked to for guidance. After the podcast episodes about my experience, other students, particularly young women, sought me out. They'd approach hesitantly in the dining hall or after class, often beginning with, "I heard your story, and I'm dealing with something similar." I never had easy answers, but I could offer what had saved me: a listening ear, unwavering belief in their potential, and practical resources for breaking free. The Montier Foundation asked me to become a peer mentor for new scholarship recipients. Once a week, I'd meet with 3 other students who had overcome similar barriers to education. We talked about imposter syndrome, boundary setting, and the complicated grief that comes with choosing yourself over family expectations. It gets easier, I found myself saying, echoing Zara's words from that pre-dawn drive away from my childhood home. Not all at once, but it does. Ayana and I had grown inseparable, her outspoken confidence balancing my quieter determination. She dragged me to campus protests and debate club meetings. I introduced her to the meditative peace of early morning study sessions in empty classrooms. Chloe remained a gentle presence, intuitive enough to know when I needed space and when I needed cookies from her seemingly endless care packages. One crisp April afternoon, I was leaving the campus bookstore with a newly purchased planner when I spotted a familiar figure standing awkwardly by the bike racks. My mother, looking smaller than I remembered, her hair grayer, her shoulders more hunched. My step faltered. We hadn't spoken since I'd left. Her single email remained unanswered in my inbox. She hadn't seen me yet. I could turn around, walk away, protect the life I'd carefully constructed. But something held me in place, not obligation or guilt, but curiosity. Who was this woman outside my father's shadow? Mom? My voice carried across the courtyard. She turned, her expression cycling rapidly through surprise, relief, and uncertainty. Lena. We stood facing each other, separated by more than just the few yards between us. What are you doing here? I asked. I wanted to see where you live now. Her voice was thin, tentative. I should have called first. Yes, you should have. She nodded, accepting the rebuke. You look different. I am different. A student brushed past us, and I realized we were standing in the middle of the walkway. There's a coffee shop around the corner, I said, not quite an invitation. She followed me to Groundwork Cafe, a crowded student hangout with mismatched furniture and locally roasted coffee. We ordered and found a table by the window. The normalcy of the situation, having coffee with my mother, felt surreal against the backdrop of our estrangement. Your father doesn't know I'm here, she said, warming her hands around her mug. I'm not surprised. Things haven't been good since you left. Shane's court date is next month. Your father. She trailed off, her gaze dropping to the table. He's angry all the time. The store is failing. He blames everyone but himself. I waited, unsure what she wanted from me. Sympathy?
Solution?
Forgiveness? I shouldn't have let him do that to you, she said finally, her voice barely audible over the cafe chatter.
Take your future like that.
I knew it was wrong. The admission hung between us. Too late, too little, but something. Why didn't you stop him? I asked, the question I'd carried for months. She looked out the window, her profile sharp against the afternoon light. Because I was afraid. I've always been afraid. Of Dad. Of everything. Of being alone. Of making the wrong choice. Her eyes met mine. Of ending up like my mother, divorced, struggling, bitter. So instead you let him control everything. Including me. She flinched but didn't deny it. Yes. We sat in silence, the weight of her admission settling between us. I'd imagined this conversation countless times, sometimes with rage, sometimes with tearful reconciliation. The reality was messier, more subdued.
I'm sorry, Lena.
Her voice cracked. I failed you. Something shifted in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. For the first time, my mother was seeing me clearly, recognizing the harm done rather than minimizing it. Yes, I said, you did. Tears welled in her eyes, but I couldn't comfort her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I didn't fail myself. I continued. I got out. I'm building something here. And that's enough for me. She nodded, wiping her eyes with a napkin. You're stronger than I ever was. We finished our coffee in silence. As we stood to leave, she moved as if to hug me, then stopped herself. Can I call you sometime? She asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe.
Not yet.
We parted without closure, but without hate. A beginning, perhaps, but on my terms this time. 2 weeks later, Ayana burst into our room, face flushed with emotion. What the hell, Lena? Why didn't you tell me? She thrust her phone at me. On the screen was a campus newsletter article. Freshman economics major named first-year recipient of Harlon Excellence Award. Below the headline was my name. I didn't know, I said truthfully. What's the Harlon Award? Only the most prestigious academic award for first-year students. Full tuition for sophomore year plus a research stipend. They only give one per year. She flopped onto her bed. My roommate is brilliant and doesn't even know it. The award ceremony was held at the end-of-year gala in the university's historic Great Hall. I wore a borrowed dress from Chloe and sat between Ayana and Dr. Colwyn, still unable to believe I'd been chosen. When my name was called, I walked to the podium on shaking legs. Mr. Harlon himself stood waiting, silver hair gleaming under the chandelier lights, his expression as measured as it had been the day he'd first heard my story in Ms. Alston's office. Congratulations, Ms. Voss, he said, handing me an engraved plaque. As we posed for a photo, he leaned close and whispered, You made every risk we took worth it. Later that week, the university's communications department contacted me. They wanted to fund a second season of the podcast I'd appeared on, this time focused entirely on educational access disparities. They offered me a stipend to co-host. You have a compelling voice, the department chair explained. People listen when you speak. My first guest was Zara, who'd recently graduated from Columbia with honors and accepted a position at a nonprofit focused on educational equity. Full circle, she said when I called to invite her. From the girl fleeing in my Honda to the podcast host interviewing me. I'm proud of you, Lena. The night before our recording session, I received a text from my mother. Shane fled the state. Missed court date. Your father asking if you've heard from him.
Have you?
I hadn't spoken to Shane since before I left home. My father's number appeared on my phone minutes later. I stared at it, heart racing, then declined the call and blocked the number. Whatever crisis Shane had created this time, it wasn't my responsibility to fix it. In my final therapy session of the semester, I told Diane about blocking my father's call. How did that feel? She asked. Scary, I admitted. Then relieving. Then sad.
Sad.
I considered the question. I used to feel guilty for choosing myself. Now I feel guilty that I ever didn't. Diane smiled. That's significant progress, Lena. That night, I found the letter I'd left for my family, the one I'd read aloud on the podcast. I reread it, struck by how my perspective had shifted in just 8 months. The pain was still there, but duller now, more like an old scar than an open wound. I opened my laptop and began a new document. Not a revision of the old letter, but a new one, a letter to myself, acknowledging how far I'd come and where I still needed to go. A reminder that freedom wasn't just about escape, but about what you built afterward. As spring gave way to summer, I chose to stay at Gray Hill for an intensive research program rather than return to Millfield. I rented a small apartment off campus with Ayana, worked in Dr. Colwyn's lab during the day, and recorded podcast episodes in the evenings. My life was full in ways I couldn't have imagined a year ago. Challenging work, meaningful friendships, a voice that people actually listened to. The constant knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for as long as I could remember had finally begun to loosen. On a warm June evening, I sat by the window of the university library, watching students crisscross the quad below. The paper in my hand still felt unreal. Full scholarship, renewal confirmed. My phone buzzed with a text from Ayana. Dinner at 7? Zara's coming too. Celebrating you. I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. As I gathered my books, I thought about Ms. Alston, now happily retired in Oregon, and what she'd said that day in her office, when my world was collapsing around me. This situation is unfortunately not unique. She was right. My story wasn't unique. Countless others faced the same barriers, the same choices, the same pain of breaking free. But what was unique was what happened next. How a few people's belief had transformed a moment of crisis into a doorway to possibility. He took my college fund and said girls don't need degrees. But my teacher was listening. And that made all the difference. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own future? What would you sacrifice to be truly seen? Like and subscribe for more stories about quiet rebellions and the people who change everything by simply listening.